So again, as I stated, this is kind of my last little lesson. Again, it's on human impact on ecosystems, and in this case, it's in terms of agriculture. Again, it came from a note that I got from another teacher that had just so much blah, 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 blah. Again, I tried to squeeze it down as much as I could so that it was just the essence of what you need to know. And again, you can always expand on that if something isn't clear. Ask me. We can expand on it if we need be. This is shorter than yesterday. So again, we're going to do this, and then I'm going to have you read a little bit about cities and the way cities can deal with environmental effects and effects on ecosystems. And again, it's super review compared to what some of you have taken. So again, the reading today is just for information. Again, I'm going to say if we get done, then we will then you can then start to look at definitions, reviewing cue cards, whatever you're doing in preparation for our review on Monday or Tuesday. I will talk a little bit about what's going to happen tomorrow. I've kind of got an idea in my mind, but I'll do that after the video is done or after I've done my recording. Okay, so human impact and agriculture. And the first thing I want to talk about is soil. No need for drawing the picture. You can just write down the information. It's in the order in which it appears. So the most important thing of an agricultural ecosystem, I guess you could call it an ecosystem. It has all the properties of an ecosystem. It has organisms, maybe not a very diverse group of organisms. And energy is converted to sugars, and other organisms consume that stuff and all that type of stuff. So it is an ecosystem in itself. The most important part is the soil. If the soil is not good, then probably it won't be used for growing crops per se. It might be just used for growing grass, which then could feed cows, etc., etc. Soil is the most important resource on Earth. The most important resources, is one of the most important resources. Composed of 3 layers: topsoil, subsoil, and then bedrock. And there can be other various things in there. I live towards Arkona, and if you take any geology courses or perhaps geography courses, physical geography, you will learn that in the last ice age, glaciers came as far south as that area there in that Arkona area. That means there's lots of gravel. So if I dig down into the dirt at my place, I very quickly get to gravel, heavy gravel. And so out in that area, there's a lot of gravel pits where they take that topsoil off and dig out all that gravel and use it for, wherever you would use gravel, okay? So the soil out at my place is quite different than the soil at my mom's place. She's out towards Brook Township, and so it's lots of clay. So it doesn't grow crops that great, but not bad. And then as you move this way towards Petrolia and then out towards Windsor, the soil gets really good and crops grow very well. It's very flat and there's lots of topsoil. Okay. Again, I'm not sure where we are with writing, so just checking. How are we doing? Am I good? Am I advancing? Am I advancing? Good to go? Again, some of you guys are writing with devices, which is okay. All right, so you'll notice this is number 8, and that's because I ended with number 7 when I talked about resource management, and we talked about we just looked at the the fishing and the hunting, and then the forestry. So this is number 8 in our kind of breakdown on how we can affect things. I do have one more, number 9, and that's on pesticides and pests. So agroecosystems, or an agricultural ecosystem. Again, I'm trying to make this as short and sweet as possible. Low biodiversity. And that simply means if you have, 150 acres of soybeans, in an ideal scenario for the farmer, all you find is soybeans and no other plants. And when you have just one type of organism, we call that a monoculture. Mono is the prefix for one. Other examples of where you'd encounter the prefix mono, you might have heard of the chemical carbon monoxide, right? Carbon monoxide, that mono stands for the fact that it has one oxygen in it. So we use that a lot in chemistry. So a single crop, and again, example, I've left it blank. You can put whatever your favorite crop is in there that you see when you drive around. Soybeans, right? Corn, wheat. What else? Tobacco. Yeah, tobacco. Out towards Strathroy and out towards, what's that? Yeah, Elmer, lots of them. Yes, correct. Tobacco. You bet. That's a good southwestern Ontario one. Less and less, which is good because we shouldn't be smoking the tobacco. Any others? Any others we see around here? Oh, sunflower seeds. Every once in a while, you'll see a sunflower field. Right, so sunflower seeds, yep. Sugar beets, yes, they are tough on the soil. They extract a lot of nutrients from the soil, all right? There's my next thing here under low biodiversity, needs to be maintained. It means that you can't just let it go on its own and hope that the next year crop's going to come up again. You need to work the land and you need to apply some fertilizer and maybe spray some pesticides. So it's a very work-intensive scenario. Susceptible to pets. Susceptible to pets. It could be susceptible to pets. That would be funny. There's a great pet infestation ravaging the fields of southwestern Ontario. That invokes funny pictures in my mind. Puppies everywhere. Anyway. Let's change that. Susceptible to pests. And that means that, let's say you have one particular, say, a bug or something like that is consuming a particular plant because the entire field is made up of the same plants. If that's the food for that particular bug, that bug will thrive and will have a devastating effect on the plants. So it can be things like aphids. Again, I don't farm, but my dad farmed and most of my relatives farmed. So, when we get together, for whatever events, I don't think it's a surprise out there, but farmers like to complain. They like to complain about things. And it's okay. It's okay that I make fun of farmers because I grew up on a farm, so I'm allowed to do that. I'm also allowed to make fun of amputees, right? That's because I am one, right? I also make fun of Dutch people as well, because my parents are Dutch. Anyway, no problem. So anyway, in terms of that, I've heard them complain about aphids, right? And sometimes there's various molds that can affect wheat, all right? And so you can have various things like mold and bacteria affecting plants, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all kinds of things. And when that comes in, that entire crop can be affected, and it can spread very quickly. Did I talk about the bananas and how the bananas are being affected? Similar thing, except down in wherever bananas come from. Costa Rica, maybe somewhere down there. Bananas. Anyway, all right. Click. So crops remove nutrients from the soil. Well, any plant removes nutrients from the soil. We talked about that in our nutrient cycles. Right? Whatever nutrients that are in the soil, maybe some nitrogen nutrients get drawn up into the plant, and then if that plant is removed from the land, then that nutrient is not able to be replenished, right? So remember, the nutrient cycle needs that decomposer to put the nutrients back in the dirt. If you grow a crop and you take all of it off of the field and you truck it somewhere else, then you're not replenishing the nutrients. And eventually the soil is not able to maintain a crop. So you need fertilizers to do that. Materials used to restore nutrients and increase production from land. Natural fertilizers. Example. What am I talking about? Yep. Excellent. I can actually spell poop, and I'm considering putting it there. What do we want to call this? Manure. And I'm going to struggle with spelling manure. So I don't know. Should I put poop or manure? M-A-N-U-R-E. Do we like that? All right, awesome. Manure, yes. Yep. Oh, that's exciting. Yeah, that's exciting. So that would be a natural whatever. All right, and it would all be churned up, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. So obviously we're talking about a downfall of manure. We'll talk about some problems with fertilizers on the next slide. But obviously odor is one. I remember when I went to the University of Western Ontario, me and a friend of mine that lived in Inwood, we would impress all the city girls by being able to identify the type of animal that produced that particular manure just by its odor. It was one of our superpowers. So obviously odor, yep. No. No, that backfired. We thought we were cool. We weren't. Manure, a downfall, obviously odor, but there are ways to solve that problem with odor. You may see some farmers, instead of spreading manure in the air, have a device that injects the manure into the ground, right? That has an implement at the back of the spreader and actually injects it right into the ground. I know my cousin has one that doesn't inject it into the ground, but has kind of a hose that runs along back and just lays it onto the ground instead of spreading it into the air. You want to tell me something? You do. Yeah, that's right. When you're done spreading manure, you're supposed to work it in. There's actually rules. It's supposed to be, I think, 48 hours after you spread it, you're supposed to, according to the Ministry of the Environment, work the manure into the ground so that it doesn't all evaporate, right? It's not that all of it's evaporating, but certain chemicals in it evaporate easily, and that's the odor chemicals. They tend to be sulfur chemicals, all right? Sulfur stinks, all right? And so the sulfur chemicals evaporate very easily, and then they cut it. So yes, you're supposed to work it into the ground. That's awesome. Do you like work for the Ministry of the Environment? No. Oh, excellent. All right. Synthetic fertilizers. Synthetic fertilizers, we could put all kinds of different lists in there, but you can buy all kinds of different fertilizers. Some of the stuff that you can buy, one thing is called potash, all right? Potash, all right? And potash contains a lot of potassium, all right? So potash is used for putting potassium into the ground, I think. Did I say that right? I'm just joking. So potash is one. There's another one that's very important, ammonium nitrate. Ammonium nitrate. And ammonium nitrate puts a lot of nitrogen into the ground, all right? That says ammonium nitrate. What's the matter? It's perfect. It's right there. A-M-M-O-N-I-U-M N-I-T-R-A-T-E. That one I can spell because it's a chemical name. Yep.
So about a month ago on a road, this farmer spilled manure.
Yep.
The side of the road.
Yep.
There was I think Black Ash Road.
Okay.
He spilled it, and there's a creek down there.
Yep.
All filled into the creek.
Oh, now the Ministry of the Environment does not like that.
I know, and we didn't tell anyone.
Yep.
Next day, he went and fixed it.
Yep.
And soiled it.
Yeah, because they do not like that. You bet, for sure.
Like that, right when they go down
Yep.
to the beach and all.
Yep. Well, it causes excessive growth of plants in that area, which is not good for that particular area. Yep. Oh. Uh-oh. Ah, right. I had a relative have a situation where the manure coming from the barn is moved to the pit. You know how they've got these big pits, the manure pit, right? And that pipe that was going to the pit had a little crack in it, and that's under the ground. It's under the ground, but that went into a tile. You know how they tile it so it drains, and that tile went to the creek, right? And so it was slowly leaking into the creek, and then someone noticed it, and then called the Ministry of the Environment, and then they drove all around the countryside trying to figure out where this little leak was coming from, and it was coming from a little crack in that particular thing. We'll talk about on the next slide why it's not good to have all of the manure, whether it's synthetic or natural, to get into the rivers or the water. Essentially, it causes growth of plant material that then overwhelms the creek and sucks the oxygen out of the water because of the way it decomposes, and then the fish can't live in there, and it just wrecks an ecosystem. It changes it greatly. Okay, let's keep going. So here's the effect right there: runoff, fertilizers into lakes, and I wasn't going to put more detail into that, but I just explained it, right? If you get all these nitrogen compounds and phosphorus compounds into the lakes, then the plants start to grow like crazy. When they die, the decomposers move in, and they consume a lot of oxygen in the water, because decomposers are alive, right? So they're using oxygen, they're not producing it. And then the fish, which needs the oxygen, can't live, and you've got this, mess up in the aquatic ecosystem. All right? Did you want to add something? I thought there was a thought there. What's that? Okay. So, groundwater contamination. So the rainwater in our part of the world, right, filters through the ground, and as it filters through the ground, a lot of bad things are removed by that filtration technique, which then ends up way down under the ground in what is called the groundwater. And then the rural people who don't have water pipes to their houses will drill a well, and then they use that groundwater. If you have excessive amounts of the fertilizer or the manure get into the groundwater, then the bacteria can grow there, and you can then have a contaminated well, which can make people sick. All right, you can have something like E. coli, which is found in manure. If that gets into your stomach, then you're definitely not going to feel well. So again, if the manure spreading is done properly, with the proper injection and working it into the ground, then it's not a problem. But if there's spills, right, or maybe a big rain and excess gets into the groundwater, that can be bad. Okay. Now, in terms of fixes, there are multiple things we can do here. Am I able to advance? I'm not sure where everybody's at. Now, this is what the textbook had, right, which is good, no-till crop rotation. But, I'm going to add a 3 here, and I'm going to say, work the manure into the ground, right? So get the manure worked into the ground. Till, let's go with till. Till the fertilizer into the ground, and that is that's a good reminder. It's not a good idea. It is a good idea, but it's not that we came up with the idea. It's a good thing to do. So no tillage farming, and this has become popular in the last probably 20 to 25 years, maybe more than that. I remember when I was, in high school and living on the farm, you worked everything. So at the end of the growing season, when the crop came off, you went into the field with a plow. You turned all of the old material upside down, And then in the spring, you went in with some kind of a cultivator or a disc type implement, which works the dirt back and forth, makes it nice and open. And then you plant the seeds in this nice, perfect, tilled dirt, and away you go. But the issue with that is that worked up dirt is very fine. So if it pours rain, that dirt can then just wash off of the field. Also, you've got to go into the field 3 times to get to that point. Once in the fall, once in the spring to work it up, another time to plant it, right? And then if you're going to put pesticides on it, another time there. And that squishes the dirt down and doesn't allow water to get through into the dirt. It squeezes it down. It's called compaction, all right? So no-till farming simply takes an implement, the planter, the last step, and with a strong little kind of set of knives, pushes the seeds right into that unworked ground. They don't till it, they just push the seeds into the ground. Seeds are great at pushing up through the dirt. They've been doing it for billions and billions of years. So many farmers are learning that it doesn't need to be worked up every year. You can just push that seed right into the ground, and then you don't have as much compaction. There's not as much of the water running right over the top because everything's squished down, that type of stuff. All right? Now, there is some times where a farmer needs to rework the field. Let's say it's a very wet time in the fall and they got to go in there with the tractors and it makes big ruts in the field and the field gets all rough. Then you almost have to start over again. They do have to do that. But if it's nice and smooth, they can keep going. All right. Crop rotation means don't plant the same crop every time, every year. So I know my cousin that owns the farm around my house. He'll do soybeans one year, and then wheat, and then corn, and then soybeans, and then wheat, and then corn, et cetera, et cetera. All right, and that means that different nutrients are being taken out of the soil every year because each plant has different nutrient requirements. When the dead stuff ends up back in the ground, it puts different nutrients back in. So it's like recycling those nutrients, and then you won't need quite as much fertilizer. Yep. Yeah, winter wheat. That's what grows around here. Okay. And so you plant it in the fall. It grows a little bit, looks nice and pretty, and then it continues to grow in the spring. That's what we grow here. There is something called spring wheat, I believe. We need your dad here at this point, I believe. He would have all the information to this. I'm pulling this information from like 25 years ago when I was... So that'd be a short-growing wheat. I suspect it wouldn't produce as much seed, or you know what I mean? It's probably not the best, but it is something that can be done. But again, I never personally encountered spring wheat, but yeah, you can have winter wheat, spring wheat, yep. I don't know. Is that a recent thing? Was it a mold? Was it a mold? All right. This is where we need a Hovind to step in at any time. This is dinner table talk for you. Oh my goodness! Because it goes on and on and on and on. So you just stop listening. Oh man. I don't know. Again, to be honest, when I get to various gatherings at like Thanksgiving and Christmas, I tune them out as well. Yeah, I hear you. I tune them out as well. I find the other teachers, and then we start complaining about students. So I guess we do the same thing. All right. So could be. I haven't heard about it this year, but I did hear some complaining last year about a corn thing, and they were spraying with planes and stuff. There were a lot of plane action going on last summer. I think maybe that's what it was. Okay. Number 9, pests and pesticides. So we've been talking a little bit about that. Pests and pesticides. They do obviously have a role in modern agriculture. So, it would be convenient for, the human population to be able to say, no more pesticides. It's wrecking the environment. But then that would put, that would put the food, supply at risk, because it does result in a lot of food being able to be produced. Question? What do we got? Oh, it doesn't make sense. So I edited too many things out. Organisms that compete for the crop. Competes. So competition. All right. Again, that's the spell checker didn't catch it because complete counts as a good one. So it's in competition with the food crop. We could be talking about weeds competing for space. We could be talking about bugs. I guess they're not competing, but they're eating. They're using the plant for food, and therefore destroying it before it can ripen. A pesticide is a substance that kills a pest. So pesticides can be insecticides for killing insects, for killing bugs. They can be herbicides, all right? And I've left out some of the others. You can actually buy something called a fungicide. What does it kill, you think? Yep. Yeah, funguses or bacteria or molds, right? A fungicide, which would be used if it was a corn mold or even that wheat. There was something they were calling it the red something mold. I can't remember. I just put some common insecticides there just to make reference to. DDT is an old insecticide, one of the earlier ones that was kind of created. It was used in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s. It killed any and every bug. It was used in massive amounts before scientists realized that it had effect on humans and birds and things like that. You can even find old advertisements, saying to the good housewives of America, do you have a bug problem? Spray all of your cupboards with DDT. And they show this lady spraying everything with DDT, and not good. DDT was responsible for causing a thinning of the egg shells in most birds, and therefore they were noticing a dramatic drop in bird populations in that time, and so you can't get DDT anymore. Malathion, that's one that I just chose because it's one that I remember from when I was younger. I personally have some malathion at home. It's a bug killer. I use it to kill what am I trying to kill? It's in my water barrels. It's in my rain barrels. Mosquitoes. I use it to kill mosquitoes in my rain barrels. I know that my dad used to use it to kill bugs that got into the corn. We would spray that. And again, it's not that good for you, so I've got to use it very sparingly, but I have some of that. Herbicides kill plants, and I just picked two of the most common. Roundup is a common name for a chemical called glyphosate, all right, and it kills all plants, right? You get it on the leaves, it kills the plants. It's recently been in the news because some people are saying that it is cancer causing. It's a carcinogen. Other people are saying no, it's not cancer causing, but someone took it to court down in the United States, and one guy was like compensated with millions and millions of dollars because he was able to argue that he got cancer from Roundup. Yep.
So let's say you try and spray it, say you're just
walking on the grass.
Sitting in front of me,
Okay.
There's a spider, and then you want to kill it.
Yep.
You spray pesticide and it will die right away.
It depends on the chemical, and it'll depend on the concentration of the chemical. All right. If you've ever used like a fly spray or a bug spray, common names, you might hear of one called conch. That's one that's very much an agricultural one. It is a neural toxin, which means it affects the brain of the bugs. And I've used it, and it doesn't like it, and it takes about 2 minutes and the bug is dead. Yeah, so it is that powerful. The argument then would be, if it's affecting the brains of the bugs that quickly, what's it doing to your brain, right? And that's a true statement. But these chemicals have been tested for safety. But, you know, sometimes with many of these chemicals, there's long-term effects, long-term effects that they can't study in the short amount of time that they invent them and then turn them into a product that can be sold. So with all chemicals like that, you know, they have a place, but if I'm using them or you're using them or your parents are using them, it should be used carefully in that you have gloves on, right? You should have some kind of a respirator to make sure you're not inhaling it, because you don't want to get the chemical through your skin nor through your lungs, that type of thing. And so there's always good practices to minimize your contact with them. And that's always a good thing to do. That's not to say if you're going to get the bug spray just to kill one spider, you're going to get the gloves on and the respirator on and that type of thing. Well, that might be a better way to do it. Get a textbook, not a science textbook, and throw it on it. Oh, anyway, yes.
You have to take like a special course to get it.
You do. That's right. You have to have a special course to know on how to handle it properly and how to dispose of it properly. When I was a kid, there wasn't any of that. When I was a kid, my dad would say, hey, go put that particular chemical into the thing. And I'm like, okay, because you didn't say no to my dad. And you just tore it off and you held your breath and you poured it and the dust was everywhere. And so I was probably exposed to quite a bit of pesticides back when I was in high school. I'm hoping that I didn't get enough in me that it's not going to result in bad things happening in my future, but you never know. But we know now better that you can't treat those chemicals that way, and that's why there's courses, and that's why there's special coveralls, and that's why there's all this stuff to keep everybody safe. Yep.
I got lectures about and my dad said, and like sprays and stuff, that they're so diluted with water that they can only affect the plant and they can't get into the water. So you dilute it down.
Right, correct. We can talk about it here. Let me bring this next one up. And as you're writing, we can think about it. So, you brought up something called dilution, and in the 60s and 70s, many people thought that dilution makes everything good. Dilution means that when you have a chemical and you put it in lots of water, okay, it spreads the chemical out so thinly that there isn't enough to affect anybody. What's funny back there? What's happening? About squishing the spiders? That's funny still? We don't care about the meme. All right, so dilution at one point was thought that's the way to do it. In actual fact, there was a saying, dilution is the solution to pollution. That's what the saying was. That if you had, say, a factory that was producing pollution, and you just let it go into the air, well, the atmosphere is so big, it'll spread out and it'll be fine because there'll be so little bit of it, right? And same thing, if it goes into a big water area, it's going to spread out and it'll be fine. But there is an issue, and this slide kind of illustrates it. So I'm going to look at the right side of this slide right now, and I'll talk about why the dilution thing doesn't always work nicely, and then you can go back and have a good argument with your dad. It'll be great. So let's say that there is some kind of pesticide, and this particular, and I found this online, and I want you to write down this bioamplification model here, whether you write it on the right or whether you write it after you write bioamplification, or I wait for the whole thing. I'm going to wait for you to write this whole thing down. Let's do that. Write this down, and then I'll write this and explain what is needed here. So I'll just wait a moment. Yes.
That is very off topic. Are you teaching grade 12 science this year? Grade 12.
I am teaching grade 12 chemistry next semester. Yeah, there'll be grade 12 chemistry, grade 12 biology, grade 12 physics. They're separate courses. I teach the grade 12 chemistry. And you're not eligible for that course yet, so don't sign up for it.
No, I was just, never mind. I was wondering if George was going to be in your class again.
Well,
I don't think he is.
I'm making a video, so I'm not going to comment on George right now. But once that's done, yeah, we'll talk about it later. Okay, so let's say a particular pesticide has been diluted in the water. So it ended up in the water, but it gets all spread out. Now, having said that, let's talk a little bit about different types of pesticides. Remember how yesterday we talked about oil spills and how some chemicals love oil and other chemicals don't like oil? Remember that discussion? And water doesn't like oil, right? It turns out that some pesticides are made from oil-type stuff, and other pesticides are made up of water-type stuff. Some like water, and some like oil. Roundup, all right? Roundup is made up of a water-liking compound. So let's say you get some Roundup inside of you, okay? Let's say for some reason you've maybe used some Roundup, it ends up on your hands, you don't wash your hands, you eat a sandwich, and the Roundup ends up in you, okay? So that Roundup is now dissolved in the water. So because it's in the water, it'll likely go through your, it'll go through whatever water systems in your digestive system that then sends water out into your body to be used by the cells. In our body, we have our kidneys, and the kidneys filter the water in our bodies. So we ingest something, if it's able to dissolve in the water, because it likes water, then it's going to go through our kidneys. Our kidneys are going to grab that Roundup molecule up, and next time you go pee, the Roundup molecule ends out, all right? So that system clears out the water. So Roundup is a chemical that is able to be cleared from your body quite easily through your kidneys, and then your urine takes it out, okay? So Roundup is probably not as dangerous as the oil-based ones, okay? 2,4-D, which is also back here, 2,4-D is, and why can't I back up? Can't see it there, but 2,4-D is a chemical that kills big broadleaf weeds, things like clover and dandelions and things like that. It's made up of something that loves oil, all right? In other words, it dissolves in things like oil. Fat in our body, and no matter how skinny or fat we are, we all have a little bit of fat in our bodies. That's like oil. So if you were to get 2,4-D into your body, it doesn't go through your kidneys, but it will end up in your system where it ends up dissolving in the fat of your body. And it doesn't like to leave because it sticks to the fat. So if you then get 2,4-D in you again later on, because maybe you didn't clean your hands the next time you did it, it's also going to go into the fat. And every time you have that type of chemical in your body, it dissolves in the fat of your body, and it doesn't like to leave. So it accumulates. It builds up in your body, okay? Okay, so then let's say we have some of that fat dissolving chemical in some water, and it's dilute, right? It's dilute. And according to someone you talk to, that could be safe, right? So in this thing, it argues, what if a grasshopper, and it doesn't matter what it is, but what if we had a grasshopper, three grasshoppers, I'm just going to put grass H, and I want you to write it. Let's say 3 grasshoppers have 3 little drops of 2,4-D on it, okay? And it drinks some water and takes in a little bit of that pesticide. I'm going to call that P, 3P, all right? And let's say those 3 grasshoppers then are eaten by, and what do we got here? It's probably a shrew or, I don't know, a squirrel. Do squirrels eat grasshoppers? Oh, it says shrew? Oh, there it is. It says shrew. So let's put here 1 shrew. Now, because the shrew ate the 3 grasshoppers, it's going to have 3 drops of the pesticide in it. Might not be drops. We could call them molecules or whatever. So it's also going to contain the 3P, the 3 drops of pesticide. Now in this picture, each one of these, 3P, 1 shrew, all right, 3P, moving its way up the food chain. Again, 3 grasshoppers, 3P, 1 shrew, 3P, and now the owl goes out and eats a bunch of shrew. And so then I've got my 1 owl, which is eating the 3 shrew, and what does it end up in its system with? Yep. It's going to end up with, say, 9 drops of the pesticide. So what happens is, as you move up the food chain, because the organisms that are below the food chain, right, are in greater numbers, you get this kind of amplification of the pesticide in the top level consumer. So then dilution doesn't really save things. You see what I'm saying? Because that pesticide, if it's one that is oil soluble or sticks to the fat, then it doesn't leave and it works its way up, okay? The water soluble ones are different. Like I said, the animals have systems to clean out the water, but we don't have systems that clean out fat soluble chemicals. They just sit in the fat. And then if you ingest something that has that in it, it stays there. Yep. That's energy. That's energy. That's an energy movement. So you're getting, so 10% of the energy at this trophic level moves to this trophic level, because remember, these animals are also using that energy to live. They give off heat. Remember, that was the joke, that Parker's hot, ha ha ha, right? Remember that? Remember Parker? Good times? Yep, okay. So that's an energy jump, but because the chemicals aren't being used up, like the energy is being used up for other things, the chemicals build as they move up, as opposed to the energy which gets dissipated as it moves up. See the difference? Okay, all right? So yeah, that 10% is just an energy use movement. Okay. So, issues affect non-target species, killing other good species. That's not a good thing. Bioamplification. Top consumers of contaminated plants and animals get the poison from below on the food chain. There's our example of that. Okay? And resistance. Some pests can become resistant due to overuse. And we see that. All right. And that's my last slide. We see the resistance part. And this doesn't have really much to do necessarily with, well, I guess it does have to do with agriculture. We see that with penicillin, all right? What does penicillin kill? What does penicillin kill? You've probably had penicillin before. If you are not allergic to penicillin, then you'll have a different version of this. What is penicillin, a chemical called? It's got a particular name. Any ideas? You're sick? You go to the doctor, they say, oh, you've got this, we're going to give you penicillin. Yep. It can be used for strep throat, you bet. So it's got this, you've got this particular organism in you, in your throat. And does anybody know what it is? It's for bacteria, all right? So penicillin kills bacteria. If you have a virus, penicillin won't kill a virus. So colds are typically from viruses. And so when you got a cold, you can't just take a medicine to get rid of the cold. It's viruses, we don't have anything that kills viruses, so your body just has to be tough and get rid of it. Okay. But if you've got a bacterial infection, penicillin does this. Just let me finish my story before we learn about, I don't know, fairies and other things. So, now, in animal farming, all right, livestock farming, bacterial infections can be a problem. So what do you do to all the animals if there's a bacteria that's killing them? Well, you inject them with penicillin. But because you're using all of this penicillin all the time, as the bacteria, not become older, but as you get different generations of bacteria, because bacteria lives, reproduces, dies, lives, reproduces, dies, lives, reproduces, Every time you get the next generation, they can be slightly genetically different. So eventually, with all this penicillin around, some of the bacteria that's able to live through the penicillin survives and is not affected by penicillin anymore. So we now have bacteria where the penicillin does nothing because it's learned how to survive the penicillin. It's become resistant to the penicillin. So we're on the verge of being in a time where even penicillin might not work, and that's because we use too much of it that the bacteria is becoming resistant to it. All right? It can happen with herbicides as well. It can happen with insecticides, but that's kind of a big example of it. Okay? Go ahead. Okay. So, the typical way in which I remember, because I haven't had an infection in quite some time, but my kids have, is it comes in that pink-looking solution, but I don't believe that the penicillin itself is a pink-colored thing. I believe that is more of a sell job to have kids consume the penicillin without as much of a fight. Look at this. It looks like bubble gum, doesn't it? Oh yeah, I'll take that. That type of a thing. So you're right. Ear infections can be bacterial. They'll give penicillin for that. Correct. Yes. That is another version of the chemical that's similar to it, but is different. So if you are allergic to penicillin, because some people are, then you will get a slightly different molecule that you're not allergic to, and that will be an example of it. So you might be allergic to penicillin because if you always get amoxicillin, then that's because they're saying, don't give you penicillin. Oh, so then, oh my goodness gracious. They're similar to each other. You can tell by the name that they're similar to each other. So they've got chemical similarities, so your body is adapting to that and becoming less resistant. Jess, did you want to add something to it?
Oh, yeah. Ear infections, isn't that antibiotics?
All of these things that I'm talking about, penicillin, amoxicillin, I don't even know how to say it, they fall under a group of chemicals called antibiotics because they kill living organisms, all right? And those organisms are bacteria. So antibacterial antibiotics, all right? Okay? So they fall under that grouping. That's what an antibiotic does, is it kills the bacteria. It actually causes the cell wall to perforate, and then it can't reproduce. That's what it does. Any other questions on that? Now, that's not agriculture, but it is an example of resistance, how then the bacteria can adjust so that it does not get killed by the antibiotic. It's not that it consciously adjusts. It's not like it goes, uh-oh, those antibiotics don't look very good. I think I'm going to adjust. It's not like us. It's that it kills everything, but if there's one or two bacteria that aren't affected by it, that are survivors, then they reproduce, and now you've got a whole new group that can survive the antibiotic. So it's not that they consciously think about changing, it's just that because there's billions and billions and billions of them, the ones that can survive it are the ones that then reproduce and have this ability not to be killed by this stuff. Yes? Okay, these are good questions, but I don't necessarily need to record all this stuff. But these are good questions. Fixes, organic farming, get rid of all of the sprays and all of the chemicals. You go home and start that conversation. All right, crop rotation, we talked about it. Baiting pests, that means putting something over there that the pests like more than the crops. You see what I mean? Put something that smells great over there, and then the bugs come along and go, oh, I don't want the crops. That smells pretty good over there. Let's bring the stuff over there. Yes? You could get a pheromone, which is a chemical, which is an odor chemical that particular pest might really like, right? In other words, let's say there were a bunch of boy bugs, and you put a spray over there that smells like all of the girl bugs. Then in the end, the boy bugs come along and go, whoa, look, there's a bunch of girl bugs over there. I'm going over there. it's a chemical that could probably be produced in the laboratory that then probably costs the same. Its effectiveness would be the question. Does it really work? Do the boy bugs get over there and say, hey, wait a minute, there's no girl bugs over here. It just smells like it, and then take off? I don't know. Okay? Yep.
If you spray stuff on your farm, it takes like a really long time to get organic.
I'm going to press stop because this sounds like a fun debate.